Hey guys, I'm gonna rip into the classic hero archetype and the classic hero's journey because this topic is calling to me. Now, despite many might claiming that good means something else than power, God would be the ultimate power, but also the ultimate good. And good effectively doesn't exist. It is just something you feel toward, or possibly you were taught to feel toward. Because you might like a custom because people taught you that custom, but if they did not teach you that, then you would not care. And you might see that if something has power or utility to you, then you might like it or not like it. But if it does not, this could even be a person, then it is ultimately trash and it's bad. And people tend to dislike things dislike those who don't have utility to them. And possibly they're gonna have some various explanations and rationalizations, and that is irrelevant for us. But I don't want to be caught up too much in technicals, but I want to emphasize that it's subjective. And most of the time, good and bad is not really used in the context of whatever high-minded thing people might claim, but personal utility and usually strength and weakness. But why kind of have a problem with many heroes? So essentially you have a guy here who essentially feels right? Now, I do the thing and I feel it's right. And that is kind of what a hero is. Of course, most heroes get some kind of validation for their acts, but this could be a validation from one group and usually not a validation from some other group. Because, the other group would be just wrong, right? Everyone who's not giving me validation is the wrong group. They might be evil or what. I mean, I am very specifically using others here because I want to keep this more general. Yet, what about even the feasibility of this kind of story? Because it falls into two categories. Either suppose they had a lot of power from the start, in which case they just dominate. And almost certainly that is the only story. Or possibly they spend some time, then they dominate. Right? Almost certainly, they need power to manifest their will. In fact, arguably, they need overwhelming power because they could be going up against crazy foes. Foes that they could be calling foes. Because if you took a step back, then you might realize that you just have a guy who just does whatever they want, and everyone who's in their way is their enemy. Yet, let's suppose for a second that whatever this goodness is that they have is something that is more limited that possibly villains might hold. Because suppose their goodness is unlimited, they would do anything to win, then I guess they're not heroes. Yet, they tend to win. Very often. And by the way, this was not my classification. But it is usually their classification that, I win the right way, I just do what I want, but I also do it by having at least one hand tied behind my back or something. Even though I could be going up against some evil empire or whatever. But naturally, this would almost certainly would lead to the outcome that they can't win. Because let's suppose that they are opposing things that do whatever it takes to win. And they are like, they follow their bullshit code. And let's say they even have a power disadvantage. They really should not win. And the only way these winnings happen in these stories that the hero actually has to be overpowered. And others have to be stupid. Also has to be lucky too. So I don't really aim to be a joy kill here, but if you actually bother to think about stories, then pretty much none of them work. The only way this really works a little better, although it is very debatable whether it's good, if you have some kind of fantasy story where the hero has some power within himself, and I guess that's it. And they're just overpowered, right? They're basically the god of this world, no one can stand in their way, and they do whatever the fuck they want. And other people are seemingly into it. That's pretty much what a hero is. Yet, let's suppose that the power is not within them. Now, you have a different problem, is that you have someone who's just mad with power, mad to get stuff. So, Mr. Hero is just mad to hoard wealth and power. They don't give a fuck about helping people. They might think they do. They might act like they do. But if you just look at the results, they don't do anything high impact. They are merely serving their own self-satisfaction while making sure they stay on top, baby. And by the way, I'm not even making the claim that others are evil or villainous or something. They are simply in the way of the hero. Even if we went with a fantasy story that did not feature some kind of Mary Sue, you would just have a guy whose main or sole purpose is personal power. They don't go around helping people. They only do that after they get bored. There are exceptions to this kind of story, but again, you would not have someone who is powerful. You would just have, let's just say, the peasant boy leaving the farm, and they are a literal peasant boy. They can't do anything. And that is not a story that many kind of like to hear. Because almost certainly, you're going to come to the conclusion that such character, and possibly this is my most crushing point, can't be good. At least not in the way they think they can. Let's just say, for sake of argument, that they are bad. Not bad. Possibly not the word we should be using, but not useful. Not very useful. Let's say that they can be a guard. They can't really do anything here. And almost certainly, society would hate them for it, right? So, not being useful equals being bad. Yet, even not being very useful would equal pretty much looked down on and having a low status and low position on some kind of a social dominance hierarchy. Ergo, not really hero here. But it's more than that, because what they can do and how they can behave is very much limited by their options. So, in this story, you will not have the peasant boy rolling it down and like one-punching everything, right? Just becoming a hero. Like, they might be forced to steal, because that is the only thing. Everyone just fucking hates them. Like, oh, why are you here, peasant boy? Fuck you. So they can't be good. Cannot find like, 50 bandits, beat them all up and tell them like a 5-minute monologue, and they all like, oh yeah, you totally changed my life, man. At best, they might be just the beggar who rolled in town and people kind of hate them and they are wary of them and they kind of want them to leave, or possibly the guards are gonna just kick him out. So they can't save the princess, they can't even find a fucking job. Yet, let even suppose average and equal abilities, they will fall behind and lose at every turn against those who do whatever it takes to win. And are not gonna be stupid. In fact, they are the stupid one, spouting the self-righteous bullshit that only really works in almost every single story because they kind of dominate, because they are overpowered, and because they get lucky. Because the dumb bullshit they do just works out. You can't have a heroic adventure if, suppose, your choice, day one, is either you die or you take from those who possibly have even less than you, and their situation is even worse than yours. Because you absolutely cannot pick a fight with those who have it better. So almost all heroes are kind of fucked in the head. They could be literally the king, living in a castle, I am the kindest king ever. Sure, my kingdom has some bad stuff in it. So maybe in between parties I may even pretend to give a fuck. But the classic hero would be God, and the world is their fantasy, where they are cheered and loved for essentially being kind of a power-mad tyrant. Well, you might argue that the message that you need power to be good, whatever we call good here, and good in this context almost solely would mean to do what you want and to exercise your will. But truthfully, they really have no right winning. Because essentially the rule of the world would be that power wins no mercy. And others could be doing what they feel like doing, what feels right to them too, but they are not necessarily claiming that it is a good thing. Unless the story is not complete nonsense, one specific type of bad or evil or rival or whatever that good likes to beat down on would be the desperate. So, to a little bit circle back to the previous story, you could have the king who's like, I'm such a good king, I'm gonna deal with the bandits. Why do you have bandits? You don't have to ask those questions. You can just go and kill the bandits, and on the way back, I guess you can just high-five your slaves. And your dirt poor peasants. Then I guess attend the party. Most good guys really seem to be struggling to use the definition good for them instead of I like it for that definition of God. And of course, a very common definition, and what you would often see, is that it just truly stands for power. And heroes tend to at least present themselves, and oftentimes this is manifested in a way that they just happen to be special or lucky or whatever, that they kind of present themselves that they are not power obsessed. But they absolutely would need to be to actually win. And I must emphasize the subjective nature of goodness here, because the hero uses a very subjective good here, and so does everyone else. Most would be not special, so you have this hero guy who is kind of making waves, and what can you do about this? Not really much. I guess if you clap for him, they might like it. At least they might not get you. But just ask the question, how do they win? Especially if they are outnumbered, overpowered, especially if they are not doing some bad things that they think are bad. That would absolutely help with winning, but they're not gonna do the sketchy things, right? They just do the right things against the right people. So the answer, again, is that they don't win. They don't win unless they are some kind of god who basically has their entire world as their plaything. You have all the little peasants, just clap for them, but never gonna really empower them to not need them, because that wouldn't be the hero way. I don't really want to go into specifics because I don't want that to divert the topic, but I suppose one example could be, let's just say Batman, the guy, he has a crap ton of money, and you can bring up a bunch of arguments, it really doesn't matter. He could do something with that, and he does not. He just get a kick out of beating up desperate homeless people. And he does have the power to empower people, and he does not. So that is kind of what the hero is. Unless you have some kind of fantasy world where you had this hero who, I don't know, was born like some really big deal magician or something, and I guess they cannot really give away their power, so they can just possibly just use it for the interest of others or something. I guess that is an easier story to tell, but even in that case, they would need to be the god of their world, again, just to go around and do whatever. Not that I'm drawing into question that you cannot have characters who act in the interest of others and are beneficial to others. That's not what I'm saying. But almost certainly, these characters would be much weaker than almost certainly every story you heard. Because that is kind of fantasy. It's just like, this is kind of a power fantasy. Not a goodness fantasy, but a power fantasy. Only reason he's good because you kind of want to feel better about that power, I suppose. Because if you had a character who was really interested in power and also was willing to do whatever it takes, then self-evidently they're gonna get much more powerful than a so-called good character. And despite appearances, many heroes really cannot escape still the very similar mindset that good means strong, bad means weak or useless. And good means my interest, and bad means not my interest. Good means I like it, and bad means I don't like it. So they're pretty much as power-hungry and definitely self-righteous as villains. Villains probably would not care that much, although that's a bit of a simplification here. You can just argue that we only have heroes. Another label that is kind of worth considering, that if you follow heroes, then they are rarely the I do as told bunch. Because I suppose that wouldn't be a fun story, but this kind of has some flaws. Because they're not really doing what is kind of good for others, they're just doing whatever they like. Now, this leads to the egoist label. Now, I'm personally not using that as a negative label necessarily, but it's certainly not a positive one. Yet, even if they are doing what others tell them to, that's not necessarily that useful either, because they might just go to the king and like, oh yeah, beat up some poor people. Oh yes, I'm a hero. I'll just do that right now. So that's pretty much it. Every hero pretty much has to have some kind of power fantasy that's included in the story. There are some exceptions, but I will be not counting special or lucky as exceptions, because like, oh yeah, you were born special, man. That's why you're not power hungry. And a hero needs power, so much power, to show their goodness. Sure, you can say, be, I don't know, possibly kind with not having power, but would you say that, like, some homeless man is a hero? The phrase itself makes no sense, because you need a lot of power to be a hero, right? Almost certainly a homeless man would be hated for their lack of power. Even if power is merely conferred by taking things from society. Because you can have many, and this would be the typical hero, who are more given their position than not. But even if they earn that, there's gonna be some kind of a special, like, I can be some kind of legendary something kind of story going on. Some peasant boy leaving their farm, trying to join the, I don't know, the army, then laughed in the face and told to go back home and farm, would not be a hero. They are not really experiencing a power fantasy. They're just farming potatoes. Are they the hero? Can they be the hero if they can all leave farm potatoes? Or that is the best thing they can do? So a hero would need so much power that they can easily take out everyone else combined who is kind of promoting their interest, possibly getting a crap ton of power all the time, while doing whatever it takes to win. Unlike the hero, apparently, who does their self-righteous bullshit and works out all the time. And in many stories, they get to be quote-unquote good because they're such of a dick. Like, suppose, just to bring up another concept, let's say that you were actually God, right? Why the fuck would you need a bunch of people to pray to you all the fucking time, right? Who the fuck cares? Just set them up good if you care. But you fucking don't. You're a total hypocrite. Now, in this case, you might not be claiming to be good or whatever the fuck that is, but you definitely don't give a shit. You just want people to praise you. And you definitely like the power balance that is currently present. Effectively, a real hero would be, if you're trying to stay true to definition, is someone who is trying to actually uplift people, even at the cost of himself, and most likely, they don't have a lot of power. And if they did, especially in the form of just stuff they have, then that would be just a testament to how much they don't give a fuck. And I heard so many fucking stories where, everyone just has to be stupid. No matter what they do, it doesn't matter, because you have this one guy who's God, and he's lucky too, and whatever it takes for them to win, and for everyone else to lose. Except those who kind of praise them. Because that's what a hero is. Yet if you read the story in a less than critical eye, you probably might be on the side of the hero, because that is how the story is kind of written. Because that's kind of how their journal kind of reads, in a way. That's usually not how it would be consumed. Like, fuck yeah, I killed a lot of people today. Fuck yeah, I killed a lot of people today too. So yeah, I'm kind of growing cold on most heroes who are just colossal dick special boys.